Okay, the left hand of darkness, part 2. Que video parte 2, pero no. Okay. Even as I think this world's sun dims between clouds regathering, and soon a flow of rain bronze sparks and hard upriver, spattering the crowds up on the embankment, darkening the sky as the king comes down the gangplank. The light breaks through a last time, and his white figure and the great arch stand out a moment vivid and splendid against the storm-darkened south. The clouds close, and a cold wind comes tearing up Port and Palace Street. The river goes grey, the trees on the embankment shudder. The parade, the parade is over. Half an hour later it is snowing. As the king's car drove off up Port and Palace Street and the crowd began to move like a rocky shingle rolled by a slow tide, Straven turned to me again and said, "Will you have supper with me tonight, Mr. A?" I, I accepted, with more surprise than pleasure. Straven had done a great deal for me in the last 6 or 8 months, but I did not expect or desire such a show of personal favor as an invitation to his house. Harge, Harge, Rem-Ir TV was still close to us overhearing, and I felt that he was meant to overhear. Annoyed by this sense of effeminate intrigue, I got off the platform and lost myself in the mob, crouching and slouching somewhat to do so. I'm not much taller. Okay. And I'm not much taller than the Gentenian norm, but the difference is most noticeable in a crowd. That's him. Look, there's the envoy. Of course, that was part of my job, but it was a part that got harder, not easier, as time went on. More and more often I longed for anonymity, for sameness. I craved to be like everybody else. A couple of blocks up Breweries Street I turned off towards my lodgings, and suddenly there were the crowd thinned out found, and suddenly there were the crowd thinned out found Type walking beside me. A flawless event, said the king's cousin, smiling at me. His long, clean yellow teeth appeared and disappeared in a yellow face all webbed through, though he was not an old man, with fine, soft wrinkles. A good augury for the success of the new port, I said. Yes, indeed, more teeth. The ceremony of the Keystone is most impressive. Yes, indeed, that ceremony descends to us from very long ago, but no doubt Lord Straven explained all that to you. Lord Straven is most obliging. I was trying to speak insipidly, yet everything I said to Tive seemed to take on a double meaning. Oh, very much indeed, said Tive. Indeed, Lord Straven is famous for his kindness to foreigners. He smiled again, and every tooth seemed to have a meaning double, multiple, 32 different meanings. Few foreigners are so foreign as I, Lord Drive. I am very grateful for kindness. Yes, indeed. And gratitude's a noble, rare emotion, much praised by the poets. Rare above all here in Erhenrang, no doubt because it's impracticable, impracticable, impracticable. This is a hard age we live in, an ungrateful age. Things aren't as they were in our grandparents' days, are they? I scarcely know, sir, but I heard the same lament on other worlds. Tive stared at me for some while as if establishing lunacy. Then he brought out the long yellow tea. Ah, yes, yes, indeed. I keep forgetting that you come from another planet, but of course that's not a matter you ever forget. Though no doubt life would be so much sounder and simpler and safer for you here in Ergerand if you could forget it, eh? Yes, indeed. Here's my car. I had it wait here out of the way. I'd like to offer to drive you to your island but must forego the privilege, as I am due to at the king's house very shortly, and poor relations must be in good time, as the saying is, eh? Yes, indeed, said the king's cousin, climbing into his little black electric car, teeth bared across his shoulder at me, eyes veiled by a net of wrinkles. I walked on home to my island. Its front garden was revealed now that the last of the winter's snow had melted, and the winter's doors, 10 feet above ground, were sealed off for a few months, till the autumn and the deep snow should return. Around at the side of the building in the mud and the ice and the quick, soft, rank spring growth of the garden, a young couple stood talking. Their right hands were clasped. They were in the fierce phase of Khmer. The large, soft snow danced about them as they stood barefoot in the icy mud, hands clasped, eyes all for each other, spring and winter. I had dinner at my island, and a 4th hour striking on the guns of Remy Tower, I was at the palace. Carhosh Island, the usual word for the apartment boarding house buildings that house the greatest part of the urban population of Carhite. Islands contain 20 to 200 private rooms. Meals are communal. Some are run as hotels, others as cooperative communes, others combine these types. They are certainly an urban adaptation of the fundamental Carthage institution of the heart, though lacking, of course, the topical and genealogical stability of the heart ready for supper. Carhinders eat 4 solid meals a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, supper, along with a lot of advantageous nibbling and gobbling in between. There are no large meat animals on winter and no mammalian products, milk, butter, or cheese. The only high protein, high carbohydrate, carbohydrate, carbohydrate foods are the very skins of eggs, fish, nuts, and the high niche grains. A low-grade diet for a bitter climate, and one must refuel often. I had got used to eating, as it seemed every few minutes. Minutes. Minutes? Minutes. It wasn't until later in that year that I discovered the Gentenians had perfected the technique not only of perpetual stuffing, but also of indefinitely starving. The snow still fell, a mild spring blizzard, much pleasanter than the relentless rain of the thaw just past. I made my way to and through the palace in the quiet and pale darkness of snowfall, losing my way only once. The palace of Ergerangis, an inner city, a walled wilderness of palace, towers, gardens, courtyards, cloisters, roofed bridgeways, roofless tunnel walls, a small forest and dungeons keeps, the product of centuries of paranoia on a grand scale. Over it all rise the grim red elaborate walls of the royal house, which though in perpetual use is inhabited by no one beside the king himself. Everyone else, servants, staff, lords, ministers, parliamentarians, wards, or whatever, sleeps in another palace or fort or barracks or house inside the walls. Straven's house, sign of the king's high favor, was the corner red dwelling, built 440 years ago for Hermes, beloved Cameron of Emran III, whose beauty is still celebrated and who was abducted, mutilated, and rendered invincible, invisible, 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 invisible by hirelings of the Inner Land faction. Emran III died 40 years after, still wreaking vengeance on his unhappy country. Emran the ill-fated. The tragedy, the tragedy, the tragedy, the, the tragedy is so old that its horror has leached away and only a certain air of faithlessness and melancholy clings to the stones and shadows of the house. The garden was small and walled. Syrian trees leaned over a rocky pool. In dim shaft of light from the windows of the house I saw snowflakes and thread-like white spore cases of the trees falling softly together onto the dark water. Straven stood waiting for me, bareheaded and coatless in the cold, watching that small secret ceaseless descent of snow and seeds in the night. He greeted me quietly and brought me into the house. There were no other guests, guests. I wondered at this, but we went to table at once, and one does not talk business while eating. Besides, my wonder was diverted to the meal, which was superb. Even the eternal bread apples transmuted by a cook whose art I heartily praised. After supper by the fire, we drank hot beer. On a world where a common table implement is a little device with which you crack the ice that has formed on your drink between drafts. Hot beer is a thing you come to appreciate. Straven had conversed amiable, 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 amiably at table. Now, sitting across the hearth from me, he was quiet. Though I had been nearly 2 years on winter, I was still far from being able to see the people of the planet through their own eyes. I tried to, but my efforts took the form of self consciously self-consciously seeing a Gentenian first as a man, then as a woman, forcing him into those categories so irrelevant to his nature and so essential to my own. Thus, thus, as I sipped my smoking sour beer, I thought that a table Straven performance had been womanly. I thought that at table Steven's performance had been womanly, all charm and tact and lack of substance, spacious and adroit. Was it in fact perhaps this soft, supple femininity, femininity, femininity that I disliked and distrusted in him? For it was impossible to think of him as a woman, that dark, ironic, powerful presence near me in the firelit darkness, and yet whenever I thought of him as a man, I felt a sense of falseness, of imposture in him or in my own attitude towards him. In him or in my own attitude towards him. His voice, his voice was soft and rather resonant, but not deep. Scarcely a man's voice, but scarcely a woman's voice either. But what was it saying? Okay.